Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Give us just a few minutes to let everyone online, okay?
I know some of these faces.
Excellent.
I see my mentor, Pat, and my two daughters.
Yay. Dwight, you recognize any names?
Oh,
No, I don't think so.
Not yet. Maybe a few will pop in.
oh,
Yeah.
bonsoir, Carl, also, my friend Carl, whom I haven't seen in forever and ever. He's from my architecture class in Montreal. I'm delighted you're here, Carl. Thank you so much.
Hey Danielle, comment ça va?
Ça va bien, et toi? Je
Yes.
t'embrasse
Oh,
fort.
hi. I think there's Susan.
Hey, Dwight.
Hi, there's
Hey,
Alan.
Dwight.
Alan,
Hey.
yes. Hey.
Where's Ruth?
She's where is she? I think she is playing pickleball.
Oh, no. We'll miss her, but I'm so looking forward to this.
Oh, yes, me too.
All right, everybody.
I
just
see
wanna-
Art. Art, there you are.
Oh, Art and Donna.
And Donna. Oh, Donna, there you are.
Woohoo.
Oh, I love that everybody recognizes everyone. It's so
Yeah.
fun.
I see Alan, who I don't recognize, but hi, Alan. Nice to meet you.
You too as well.
All right, I'm gonna go through and just mute everyone who's not the speaker real quick and then introduce everybody. So I think most of us know each other, it sounds like, but I am Jackie from Hub City Bookshop, and I'm here with Danielle Fontaine, the author of Still Time on Pie Pond, and Dwight Rose, who will be talking with her today. I'm going to introduce both of these wonderful speakers and then let them take over and talk to you guys for a little while. If you have any questions, I think the authors may be okay with you unmuting to ask questions towards the end when I open for that, but I would prefer if you would type them in the chat window if at all possible, just to avoid interrupting the authors speaking at all. But we really do want questions, so feel free to type them in there, send them to me, and I'll voice them for the authors. So first I'm going to introduce Danielle. Danielle Fontaine was born in Saint-Adolphe, Quebec, Canada, and lived in 4 countries and 6 states before settling in South Carolina in 1999 with her husband and 4 children. She is a graduate of McGill University in Canada, Oxford University in England, and Queen's University of Charlotte in the United States. Her fascination with art began as a child with the architecture of the Montreal World's Fair. The fantastic forms, colors, and stories of Expo 67 inspired her to study architecture and later creative writing. When she discovered encaustic painting, a new storytelling adventure began. Dwight Rose is a professional artist specializing in painting and teaching watercolor. After graduating with a BFA in painting from the Ringling College of Art and Design, he began his career in Sarasota, Florida. Exhibiting in local galleries, his paintings were recognizable with images of tropical landscapes and historic homes. Teaching for Ringling College, he later expanded his courses to community and museum programs. An award-winning artist, his work has been in the South Carolina Water Media Society Traveling Exhibition, and recently featured at Converse College, Blowing Rock History and Art Museum, the Peacock Gallery at the Middle Georgia State University, USC Aiken, Etheridge Center, and the Art Station Stone Mountain in Georgia. His career includes memberships in the National Watercolor Society, the Florida Watercolor Society, the Manatee Art Center, and a signature member in excellence at the South Carolina Watercolor Society, excuse me. He has been a board member of the Spartanburg Artists Guild and the Spartanburg Collective, formerly known as the West Main Art of Cooperative in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We are so grateful to have you both joining us today, and I'm going to pass it over to Dwight to introduce Danielle and start us talking.
Okay, well, it's just so wonderful to see everyone that's logged on and Danielle to be with you to celebrate this wonderful occasion. I understand that we have something in common here, that we both met at GCCA, and this goes back to 2015, I believe, was the first time we actually met. We were a part of this group that were sort of the first group, actually, that were part of the pioneers or trailblazing artists that signed on to help convert this once formerly a mill into this art center. And boy, I tell you, it's amazing to see what they have accomplished so far. And it's really, really exciting. I'm looking forward to getting back there sometimes fairly soon. I'm just dreading that I-85 trip that I used to take. That it's just absolutely, a challenge sometimes. But anyway, so during that time, I think it was around 2016, it could have been early or late 2015. I signed on to be one of the instructors there at GCCA. And then that's when I met you and saw your work. And you were a studio artist at that time. And when I saw your work, Danielle, I was just captivated.
Oh, thank you.
And at the time, I wasn't even aware of the imbuing family story that was behind it. I just saw beautiful art and the appropriation of how you actually utilize the encaustic medium so skillfully and conveying texture and just the confluence of how you brought light and shade together. They were just compelling images. I would actually, and I tell you, didn't know this before, but I would take sneak peeks of your work. And when you weren't around, and I kept coming back, and I kept coming back to the same conclusion. The work had to be shared. It had to be seen. And the underlying fact that it was, and it so happened that I was at the time on the board of West Main Artists Co-op, and my responsibility was to procure shows for the venue, which is what it was called back then. And now I think it's called the Artist Collective, which is the new term for it. We basically went out and we sourced emerging artists, and we sourced artists mainly primarily from the Spartanburg and the city and the county areas. But you were an exception. And I convinced the board to, look at this. And, we fortunately too, at that time, we had an emerging or evolving encaustic program that was just starting up with the center. And I convinced them, thank goodness, that we needed to have your work up there. We needed to show the community and to get this work in to our show calendar to, have people experience this. So I asked you, I came up and I was like, oh, I hope, I just pray that she says yes. Oh. And I absolutely was dreading this moment, but I walked up to you and I asked you, and you said yes, a resounding yes.
But of course.
Just absolutely, excited for that response. So with that said, we got you on our schedule, and we had a wonderful show, and I just love the outcome of what has become of that show. And people, even to this day, I was just speaking with the president of the Artist Collective, Beth Regular, and saying how much that show has really put the Artist Collective on the map. So I turn it over to you, but that was just absolutely a story that is, I'm leaving so much out, I know, but it's a good start for now.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I was touched when you said I stood out and that you implied it was by my art. Normally it's by my accent, but I'm glad you appreciated the art. And of course I was happy to say yes, who wouldn't, the Artist Collective, the West Main Artists Co-op, it was called back then, is a beautiful venue with a great group of people running it and teaching over there. So yes, that exhibit, in fact, became the basis for my book. And I had asked the Metropolitan Arts Council here in Greenville for a grant to prepare a little booklet based on the exhibit. And it was going to be a little like 16, 20 page booklet of the art. And there was at first no bigger ambition than that as far as the book was concerned. But about the same time, I was taking a workshop at the artists, at the Greenville Center for Creative Arts here in our old Judson Mill, and with Catherine Paul, who you know, and Marc Brosseau, a Pollock Krasner Foundation grantee who was teaching the workshop. And they made me dig or explain a lot more of the story behind the art. And they convinced me that that story needed to be told a little more explicitly, so that people would understand what the art what was doing to me, how it was channeling and managing my emotions versus this story. So right now, if you all don't mind, I will read a little section of the book that does explain the family story that gave birth to this art. So if you all excuse my cute little French-Canadian accent, here I go. And that's where I put on my reading glasses because I'm that old now. Good. So Pie Pond, just a few words. First came a diamond ring, and Grandpa was happy and proud. He had been an airman himself, reaching the rank of Senior Master Sergeant in his 22 years of service in the Air Force. His son Bill, the handsome second lieutenant who had swept me off my feet, had graduated from the US Air Force Academy at the top of his class, a badge of honor for the son of sharecroppers. That his granddaughter, our daughter Marie, was now engaged to a young cadet from the academy seemed like a match made in heaven, or at the very least in the wild blue yonder, to borrow words from the Air Force song. A new family tradition was spreading roots away from the toils of the southern soil. But still, roots do run deep, and after his service, Grandpa had come home to the South. He bought a piece of land on Pie Pond with a solid brick house at the end of a long dirt drive, and further back, a little yellow wooden house from bygone days when the land was king and master. Things were different now. He was a gentleman farmer. He could ply the sandy soil to his hand whichever way he pleased, save the few pecan trees and majestic live oaks, plant various grasses and keep a dozen cows, line the fences with wild grapes that the goats would eat. The cows liked to outwit the fences. They favored Grandma's flower garden. Eventually, Grandpa plowed the whole large expanse of the backfield and turned it over to a pine plantation. By summer 2009, the pines were not yet much more than spindles. The trouble began with the formal invitation. We mailed the cards far and wide, the typical scattering of military wedding invites, even reaching across the northern border to my family in Montreal, where the American South and anything military remained distant and mysterious. The Air Force Academy was equally distant, many states away in Colorado. Grandpa had yet to meet the young cadet he'd heard so much about. Marie had designed the card herself in shades of pink and gray. Upon opening the envelope at Pie Pond, Grandpa would have glimpsed two wide smiles brightly drawn, one familiar, the other one brand new to him. He would have seen Marie's long hair on her shoulders and the happiness in her clear eyes. Ryan's face leaned against hers, his dark hair in a military buzz cut, dark eyes gleaming behind thin frame glasses. And that shading. Take away the pink and the undertones were unmistakably brown. Or was it a Facebook post? Grandma no longer remembers exactly what triggered the storm. Neither she nor Grandpa use social media, but Uncle Cliff does, and he likes to keep in touch with the whole family. I can imagine him calling his older brother. Congratulations, I saw a photo. He seems like a nice young man. I didn't know he was Black. Grandpa hadn't known either, and he saw nothing nice about it. The silence came after the storm. Whatever thunderous clouds had burst over Pie Pond, Grandma had kept to herself. She sent their regrets. Travel was too physically taxing. They missed a beautiful wedding. Ryan's first assignment after pilot training brought the young couple to Alabama, just over the state line from Pie Pond. Marie's joy at the prospect of a long-awaited reunion with her grandparents was unfortunately short-lived. It quickly became clear that she and Ryan were not welcome at Pie Pond. Distance and mystery. Almost 30 years married to his son, and I had never grasped the depth of this sudden cliche in Grandpa. It was and still is beyond my understanding. Bill knew since before the wedding, of course. He figured all his dad needed was some time and the right occasion, which was now. He picked up the phone. There was a lot of back and forth that seemed to go nowhere. Short entreaties by Bill between long silences when he shook his head, listening. Then stillness. Dad, do you realize it's my daughter you're talking about? The words echo still. I dared not ask what transpired at the other end of the line. I had seen my husband cry once before, long ago, when he lost a friend in pilot training. There had been more tragic accidents, a war even, but now, only now, for the second time, tears. The tears dried, something one learns to handle after plane crashes in a war. And we came back to Pie Pond again and again, minus the children. These are our roots. This is family, truncated as it may be. I became the silence. When Grandpa came in, I went out. Camera in hand, I wandered around the pond and the barns and the pines and all the precious odds and ends Grandpa collected about the place. Sadly picturesque. He'll come around, Bill told me once more. Behind him, Grandma shook her head no. And as much as I wanted to believe him, the 5 years since the wedding gave her opinion more weight. Grandpa walked in and I walked out. Scattered about in the midday sun, the by now all too familiar odds and ends brightened the scene as best they could. The old blue topple barrel called to me. My shadow reached it first, my head and the swirl in my hair darkly rendered on the rusty end. In the center, a small cloud of white paint nearly vanquished by the weather. My state of mind exactly. A self-portrait if there ever was one. I snapped a picture. I waved at my shadow. It waved back and I captured that too. Shadow of a doubt. And just like that, the pictures became the story. All these Pie Pond pictures, silently recorded, silently recording. That is the point where I realized that I had to do something with all these pictures I had been taking at Pie Pond. That story was gnawing at me inside. I was at that point, whenever I visit Pie Pond, I really was a silence. I would escape to the outdoors and keeping all this inside me, which is not a good feeling. And when I realized that the story was in the pictures, I figured if I could express these pictures, because the words were too difficult to express, there was no more possibility of dialogue. It was a dead end. So I figured if I expressed these emotions in the pictures, it would help free my soul of everything that was bundled up in there.
Mhm.
And this is, if you can all see that picture of the blue barrel that day that I took. It was literally that moment when I realized these pictures are capturing something more than just the rust, you know. And this was one of the early pieces I did in my studio, which is based on that actual picture I showed before of the blue barrel. And that's all how it started. Mhm.
Danielle, a question for you, and I've always wanted to ask you this question, of course, and you know, there's never the right time. But how could you tell when the series was finished? Was there's somewhat of an indicator there for you that you know made that happen, or?
Well, it hasn't happened because I thought after this exhibit, I'm like, oh, I put this out there and I can move on to something else. And there were more trips to Python, more images in my, not in my camera anymore, but online wherever I keep my pictures on my hard drive. And there was always more that felt like it needed to come out in various ways. So what I'm working on in my studio still comes from Python. Very early on, and if you look early in the book, it talks about the very, among the early works, the landscapes that I was doing. Let's see if that's showing out there. So those were kind of the happy pictures out there, and I no longer have them. People love the landscapes, so they have all been bought up. So as my book came out, what I had in my studio were all the other pictures that are more telling of the story, a little starker, a little less what people would want to buy to put in their kitchen or over their couch. So as soon as the book was published, I thought, well, when people come to my studio, I do want them to see that Python really is a beautiful place. There's much beauty there too. So since the book has been published, I have been going back to doing some landscapes. So when people come to my studio and know more about the story, I can tell them, look, it really is a beautiful place. Most everything at Python is beautiful, and our family is beautiful, and Grandpa is a beautiful person in every other way. But so I have been painting those landscapes, and amazingly to me, and I'm so flattered, I entered one into the Anderson, the 46th annual art show, juried art show in Anderson, and won the second prize with one of my tiny little landscapes. So there's good feeling parts of this story too.
I'm proud to note that in your book, where James Mann wrote in this section there, that there's some very similar reactions to what I had in terms of what he shared in that I thought was very insightful. And I love where you commented also on the fusing process after application does not lend itself to easily to straight line work. And it simulates a little bit of what I do as an artist in watercolor. Because everything is loose and wet, and even if I sketch and indicate a line that's relatively straight, it usually invariably evolves into something on its own, and it never really is the same line anymore. So I think encaustic is absolutely been the appropriate medium for that that thought process, and that's good.
There's a little part of the story that's missing in between all this, and between the time when I found that these pictures were the story at the time when I'm in my studio working on them. And it's that time when I was walking up Pendleton Street here in Greenville, came across the studio of Pat Kilberg, who's here tonight. Hi, Pat. And I was with Bill. We saw a beautiful painting. We walked into the studio, bought the painting. Pat explained that it was encaustic, and Bill and I went, what? We've never heard of encaustic. So Pat explained what it was. We bought the painting. She invited me to a workshop, and I thought, oh, it would be fun to learn about this.
Mhm.
And then she mentioned, and if you have photos you'd like to work on and work from, there's much we can do with photos with encaustic. And I'm like, man, I have this pile of Python photos where my story resides now, and I could let it out maybe with this new medium if I learn how, and if I enjoy it. And I loved it at the workshop.
Yeah.
The problem is I didn't have a studio where I could do that. We just moved downtown in a townhome where we have no extra space to set up a studio with ventilation, which is needed for encaustic. And at that point, Pat tells me, oh, and she's on the board, like you were on the board in Spartanburg, she's on the board of the Greenville Center for Creative Arts, and tells me, oh, we're about to open this new center and there'll be studios available. You could look into that. And I was delighted to hear about that, because not only did I want to explore encaustic, but the kids had all just left home, graduated from college, gotten married and all that. We just finished building our new town home, and I had time on my hand, and I thought, what a fantastic project to be in at the ground floor of building this new art center and contribute in any way I can. And so the story happened from there, kind of a serendipitous encounter in the old village of West Greenville with Pat's studio, and that's the power of the arts, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you, Pat. Pat, what's exciting is that Pat, at this very moment, has her own solo exhibition in the exact same space where I had my Pie Pond exhibit. So the world comes
Wonderful.
around.
It all does. It all does. Yes. Yes. And to paraphrase James's commentary, you know, he talks about to call your imagery bleak would be misguided. And it's interesting because I did not know in the very beginning, of course, the inspiration behind all of this, and what was, you know, the underlying, you know, issues here. And again, he was spot on. You know, it's the work still imbued, you know, excitement, interest, and very attractive to a certain degree. You know, in spite of what it you know, was the evolution of why the work was created. As far as the exhibit, we had countless discussions back and forth, and of course everything is monetary, everything is, you know, what's budgeted, what we could do. But the Yellow House, we debated back and forth whether we could create something that would, you know, replicate that, because I know that was the centerpiece or the center point of what the show was all about. And that's my only regret.
Oh, well, the Yellow House, if we have viewers here who haven't read the book yet, it's another little chapter in the book. The Yellow House was that little yellow house in the back of the farm where for a couple of years, Bill and I and the kids lived there right next door to Grandpa and Grandma. We had been in the military for the longest time, traveling all over the place, out west in Germany, not traveling, living in various places. And so we thought at that time it would be a good time to go get closer to Bill's parents, so the kids would get to know their grandparents a little bit. And so that little yellow house with a 100-year-old sharecropper's house, it was tiny and cute and lovely, and we had a wonderful 2 years there. But of course, the house was showing its age, and it was on its last legs. And Grandpa rented it out a few more years after we lived there, but then the maintenance got to be more than it was worth. And eventually the house was bulldozed into a burn pit and burned, so that the house where we'd been so happy was gone. But whenever I went back to Pie Pond, I would find all around the pond and the farm the pieces of the house that wouldn't burn, the cinder blocks that were the foundation, because it just sat on a few piled up cinder blocks and beams and joists, and it wouldn't take much of a tornado to taken it out. And it had the metal sheathing that would cover the base a little bit, and it had a few of the mechanical elements, the electric connections and the plumbing connections that I found around. So I was able, actually, by using two walls put at 90 degrees to each other, to almost recreate a bit of the inside of the house and a bit of the outside of the house. So the little yellow house was there.
Right.
It was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's your favorite piece, if I may ask? I mean, of course, that's always the number one, topic or question. You should never ever ask an artist, but I'm going to ask anyway.
My favorite piece, well, they all tell a story, so it's almost like you're asking me to tear a page of my book and say, this is my favorite page.
Okay.
But of course, just from a purely artistic point of view, detached from the story, I love all the more architectural pieces. I did spend 4 years in architecture school before I met this American military that took me totally on a different path. So I felt like, well, when I do the more architectural works, I feel a little connected to what I thought my life was going to be very many years back. There's a piece that always causes a lot of, there are a lot of comments about it in my studio, and it causes quite a bit of consternation in other places. And some of my work, as you've seen in the book, are actually encaustic photographs. It's just photos I've taken that I've preserved under a clear encaustic medium. So there's a piece of the little yellow house that shows the bathroom in the little yellow house having fallen apart after the house was pretty much past redemption. And I remember distinctly the day I walked into the old house and took that picture, just maybe the year before the house was actually torn down. And it really struck me that that one particular scene encompassed the whole story, because here was all these plumbing elements falling apart, and everything had rusted, the walls had cobwebs, and the white paint had turned yellow. And yet in the middle of this, in a bathroom that apparently hadn't been used in forever, the toilet didn't even sit on its foundation anymore, there was still a roll of pristine white toilet paper. And I'm like, how does that hang in there like this? And it struck me that that little stubborn piece of whiteness hung in there as the family was kind of falling apart because of this story. So it's not an aesthetically pleasant piece. And I never wanted to actually redo it in encaustic. I thought it was important to preserve just a photograph of it, because if I'd done it in encaustic and accentuated that white roll of toilet paper, everybody would have been, oh, she just exaggerated the white or something. But no, it's just the way it was. So even though it's not in many ways a beautiful piece, it's the piece to me that in just one photo tells the whole story. And that's how I felt when I walked that one time. The little piece of stubbornness, it would be so easy to fix and reharmonize everything, but there's a catch.
Yes, and a very powerful piece, but I must say it surely generated a lot of feedback and created a narrative of, and the juxtapositioning too was one could say could have been purposeful in a way, and to send that message that, that the kind of world we're living in, and, we have these challenges and back and forths, and, it did what it needed to do, I presume. So.
There are certainly other pieces. Some of my little pieces work in series. The group, which are also encaustic photos, where I came across various plastic objects. They're all colorful plastics. Some of them are toys. Some of them are oil cans or cans of paint or industrial materials of some kind. And together they tell a little mini story within the story. So I'm also partial to those. There's one that's actually not in the book about that old chair. If you remember the old Eames chair that,
Yes.
that was in the exhibit.
Right.
In the exhibit, there were a few artifacts taken from Pie Pond, in addition to the art. And so there's this old Eames chair, the chrome craft version of it, which is a highly known, good, nice, solid design from the mid-century that lives on today. And this is an old one that's been living outside at Pie Pond, and their legs are all rusted, and there's kind of a little moss growing on the plexiglass. And yet every time I walked around Pie Pond, that chair called to me because it read design. And I'm like, I could recognize myself there, a piece of design like I had studied so hard many years ago. So I had included that in the exhibit along with photographs. Every time I went over a period of many years, I would take a picture of the chair, and I had the sequence of that chair over the many years, the evolution of the rust and the moss, and the times when it had been turned over, and that was a fun part of the show to me too.
Yeah. So there is still time on Pie Pond.
Yes.
And yes. And alluding to the underlying topic or subject of relationships and family. And the Pew Research says, I think it was back in 2010, that all marriages in North America, 15% were of interracial marriages. And that's a 30 years, a rate of 30, that's an increase in twice as many, over a 30-year period. And it's just progressively getting more and more, frequent as we become this multinational environment that we're living in North America. There are still, certain attitudes and certain sensibilities about that, especially in certain parts and regions in this country. And in particularly, in certain southern states that it seems to prevail especially in the older generation. Out of this whole project, do you feel that there has been some kind of growth towards healing, and towards coming together, and towards, understanding a little bit more about that we're very similar and very much, although very complex human beings, but do you feel that there's any healing from the whole process?
I can say that at the family level, at least at Grandpa's level, sadly, not yet. I keep hoping that it will happen, because we love him, and we want Marie and Ryan to be full parts of the family, that when we have a family reunion, they're welcome to come too. So I'm very much hoping it will happen. I'm hoping that anyone else who read the book might have had their eyes open a little bit by it, and realize that they're, I think within the family, it's been 11 years now since Marie and Ryan have been married, and it just got to be this, oh, well, it's just the way it is. And somehow gets swept under the rug. I'm sorry you can't join in on this, but we'll see you on all these other occasions, which are many, but there's still these few occasions where they can't be all this togetherness. And there's this old saying that says time heals all things, but what time does in this situation is not heal. It's, like I said, sweep it under the rug and let's just not talk about it. And it's wrong because it won't change if we don't talk about it. And sometimes the beginning of the discussions are difficult because somebody does not want to be open about possibility of change. But you got to start somewhere, and I hope that my book is a starting point. If sadly not for us, then hopefully for other people.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Mhm.
Well, Jackie, are we ready to turn it over to our audience for questions, or what do you think?
We certainly can. We have a few
Are you-
questions. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we have a few questions and a few comments. You mentioned including a guest. Did you want to ask any questions of him, Danielle?
Was Ryan able to join us?
He is here.
Yes, Ryan, I would love to hear, because Ryan is my son-in-law who we're talking about in this book, and he had a very strong reaction and heartfelt, heartbreaking reaction to the book. And Ryan, if you want to share some words about this, I would love to hear that.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think that's probably the first reaction I had was to call Danielle and say thank you, because from the beginning, when I met Marie and then when we got married, Danielle and Bill and Marie's immediate family, our brothers and sisters, have been nothing but welcoming to make me feel like a part of that family and make me feel loved. And this interaction with Marie's grandfather has been, something that's been kind of to the side. It's interesting to me because I've yet to meet him, as we've all covered, and so it's interesting to me. It hurts me more because it hurts Marie so much. It hurts my wife so much that she has all these memories of being on Pie Pond, that place, that little yellow house, has all those memories of being a kid and running around on the farm, and all the stories she used to tell me about making molasses out of sugarcane and going fishing in the pond itself and running around as a kid is such a beautiful thing that I know she holds dear. And that now that we have our own kids, especially, it's hard because we can't go there ourselves right now. That's where it hurts so much. But one of my favorite pieces in Danielle's exhibition was, there's a piece that you can see that is of a doorway, a closed door, but then next to that closed door, there's another door, right, that has been yet to be installed, and it's sitting next to that. Yep, so you can see the doorway there, and then next to it, there's a doorway leaning against the rest of the house. And it seems to me, to answer your question, Mr. Rose, about hope, is that picture to me kind of embodies that hope, is that we have this closed door right now, but there's another door that has yet to be installed. And maybe we have to find a new way, a new place to install this in this place, to open a new door, to kind of go in and heal this. And so I said, thank you, because the fact that Danielle decided and had the bravery, the courage to say this out loud, to use this medium and to say in no small fashion, in a nationally published book, in an exhibition, in an artist statement, to not cover it up at all, but say this is really what's happening, and these are the feelings all the way on the surface and all the way down deep that I'm trying to explore here. That's something that hasn't happened a lot, and I think that is the most powerful thing we can do, is say that this is actually happening. This is how we feel. This is the thing that's wrong that we can fix. And when we start saying it out loud, then we can start installing that new door and creating new hope and new pathways to go back. So that's what I called and tried to tell Danielle. That was my reaction. Say thank you so much for doing that. And this was also the first time I really had heard all the things, all the conversations that Bill had with his dad, all the times that he's been trying to carve a new space and get us back over there, and all the things that they've been doing to try to really, because it could have gone several ways with family. Said, yes, this is my family, this is my father, but you're also part of this family, and I'm not going to make you any less part of this family. We're going to keep fighting to make this family whole across the whole family. So those are all of my feelings. There's a lot of feelings they come flooding in, but that's really what happened when I first read the book and got to talk to Danielle again.
That's wonderful.
Thank you for sharing, Ryan.
I can add one tiny little bit from Marie's point of view. Marie might be here somewhere, but she's got the 2 babies with her, so she can't jump in as easily. But so often when I would be telling the story, even before starting the paintings and all that, just allude to the story and say, well, you know, Grandpa is not open to this idea. He doesn't want Marie and Ryan in his life. And people's reaction were so often, oh, well, you know, that's his loss. And Marie would reply, no, it's my loss too. I used to have a grandpa and I don't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, get emotional.
It's certainly an emotional subject.
I try to smile anyway, but I can smile and cry at the same time.
I have, if you don't mind, I have a question that's kind of related. I really appreciate Ryan sharing and being willing to talk to us too. One of the audience members, Kathleen, asked if grandfather knows about the exhibit in the book and if he had any reaction to it. If you don't feel comfortable answering that, that's fine.
Yes, Grandpa knows, and he learned about it. Well, he knew I was doing art, and he came to visit my studio, and he loved to see all the beautiful pieces that he told me he thought they were beautiful, and it was nice rendition of his farm, and he was proud that I would show that, but he did not know the exact story behind the art. He just recognized the farm and enjoyed that. And again, he's not on social media, but there are many family members who are, the cousins and Uncle Cliff and Uncle Roy and other uncles who I love very much. And so they heard about the book through social media and relayed that to Grandpa. And so I sent a copy of the book to Grandpa with a little note saying that, you know, Grandpa, this is a sad story and it breaks my heart because it could be different. And so he received the book, but as I said, it did not change his mind at all. It made him upset. He's worried that he is pictured in a bad light with, you know, the house falling apart or the various objects around the farm that are, you know, not in their prime anymore. And so he's worried very much about how this affects his image. And he has trouble reading the book as a metaphor for the larger story. And what I want to say to him is that people are not worried at all about the objects around the farm or the house that was too old to save. Everybody understands those things. The one thing that people have concerns about in this story is the sad part where the granddaughter is no longer welcome at the farm or in family events that include Grandpa. So sadly, he did not receive the book well. It was to be expected after that many years. I knew it wouldn't be easy to change his mind, but as Ryan explained, at some point you have to take it out in the open. Otherwise things don't change. And if it won't change for my family, I'm hoping that it opens eyes somewhere else. or doors, as Ryan says.
I think you were holding up something while Ryan was talking, but the image was too small. Would you mind holding that up again for us?
Oh, the door he was talking about?
Yeah, you're.
Okay, let me see.
Oh, lovely. That's perfect.
Yeah, so that's a series of 2 doors, and Ryan particularly likes the white one, the red one that has the one old rusty door that's installed, and then some door that's just leaned there, not offering entrance to anywhere, but hopefully it could be installed someplace and change things. So that piece is called Equal Opportunity, the one with the red door, and the other one with this glass door and the screen door is called social mobility. And sometimes mobility is not necessarily leading to much progress.
Wow, those are powerful pictures.
Mhm.
Thank you. I saw you holding it up in the corner, and I wanted to make sure everybody got to see it in case they don't have the book yet, but we should definitely get the book. It's worth it. We have a couple of comments, if you don't mind me just reading those, and we'll see if anyone else pops in with questions. I think it's Miss Young who's on. She says, Art and I attended the opening of Danielle's exhibit, and I have a copy of the book. In the past 2 weeks, we have seen Dwight's watercolors in Aiken, South Carolina, and Pat Kilberg's encaustic paintings, encaustics and quilts in Spartanburg. Such beautiful art from all of you, and a privilege to be part of this artistic community. And
thank you so much, Art and Donna. And yes, we try to hang together and lift each other up.
I love that you are familiar with each other's work. Go ahead, Dwight.
No, I was just going to also thank Donna for that comment. I did notice that she had posted a few, not a social media savvy kind of guy, but she took it on herself to post a few of my images online and up on Instagram, and thanked her for that too. Yeah.
She also said, after reading the book and seeing the original encaustic of the pickup truck way across Pie Pond, had an amazing emotional effect of me, and I know with Danielle too.
Thank you.
And then Renee had a comment. I felt like you did a very good job recreating the feel of walking through the broken down house and the surrounding property in the layout of your exhibit. It definitely added to the telling of the story within the space.
Thank you, Renee. And that is presented somewhat like that in the book too. I try to recreate the feel of that part of the exhibit so people feel like they're entering that little white house before it was dismantled.
Yeah, I wish I had a copy of the book to hold up. We sold out of them, but we have more on the way. So they're just lovely books. So we don't have any more questions popping up at the moment, but I will just keep an eye on that. Dwight, did you have any more questions for Danielle?
Just one more. Danielle, for you, if you had to do anything differently, what would that be in this whole process of putting this all together?
In the whole process of what?
Of putting the book together, what was the most difficult aspect of it? And if you had a chance to go back, what would anything you would do differently?
I haven't thought about that. It went pretty smoothly and almost magically. Like I said, I was going to do just a little book to showcase my art. I wasn't going to do the whole story. Then I took that workshop, and Catherine Paul, who I mentioned before, Dr. Catherine Paul was a professor emerita of English at Clemson University, and she was an artist at the Art Center also. And she's the one who pushed me to bring more of the story, to tell the whole story in the book. Mm-hmm. And I was going to self-publish. I had the grant to help me with that, and she suggested I should find a publisher, but doing that, I'd have to kind of give up my grant because it was going to take me past the expiration date of the grant. So I told Bill, well, maybe I shouldn't do that because I have the grant, that's for sure. Whereas publishing process, who knows? And Bill says, Catherine normally knows what she's talking about. And if she thinks that your book stands a chance, give it a chance. It's something that you may not have the occasion to replicate once you've self-published. So I did, and Catherine was so generous in helping me revise my proposal to publishers over and over and over until I had it just right. I'm lucky she's a published author, so she knew how to go about it. So after revision number 22 or so, I was ready to send out my book proposal, and Clemson University loved it right away and invited me to publish with them. So no, I wouldn't change anything. It almost all happened like by magic. So that was nice.
Yes, that's a good thing to happen, because I do know myself, who I self-publish, but do know the challenges of finding a publisher these days is not an easy prospect. It just isn't, and it requires a lot of push and pull and the gravitas of having something that a publisher really feels it's worth their time, effort, and money to do. So, and this obviously was very important in that aspect.
And it's time consuming. The book actually came out almost exactly 2 years after the exhibit. So there's a long process of applications and proposals and designing the book and revising the book and waiting for the printers and all that. So it was a long process and so well worth it. I'm so happy how it turned out, and it was a learning experience in tons of ways.
Good.
And of course, we're thankful for Hub City. The reason I contacted Hub City Bookshop when the book came out is that it is a bookshop in Spartanburg, just 2 blocks from the art center where the exhibit happened, and they have been so welcoming, and Jackie did such a great job of putting this event together out here. Fantastic.
Thank you, Danielle. We were really excited to hear about this book, and we've done some other things with Clemson University Press, and they have wonderful taste, and we're really happy to work with them. So, Renee asked a question that I think is really applicable. She says, are you actively looking to stage another exhibit now that your book has been published, since we were just talking about kind of the distance between the exhibit and the book?
Oh, that actually would be fantastic. So I will certainly be looking for opportunities. I've been concentrating lately on my little landscapes to present that happy side of Pie Pond, and on distributing the books. I have received another grant from Metropolitan Arts Council. They remembered that I had given back half of my initial grant when I decided to seek a publisher, and now they're helping me actually distribute the book to various places, libraries or schools that are connected to the locales or the protagonists in the story. So my book is actually going to quite a few places, including my college at Oxford and Marie's art school in England. She went to the Cambridge School of the Arts for MFA while Ryan was stationed in England. So the book is finding ways to reach people in various places. I hear you just mailed one to Oregon, so hopefully it will not be completely forgotten in a year or 2 or 5. That it will stay on those shelves for people to view. It's important from an artistic point of view a little bit to me too, that because encaustic is not a very well-known medium, there are not very many books about it, and most people who practice this medium practice abstract art. So there are even fewer encaustic books with representational works. So it's nice for hopefully art students in various places to have access to this different way of using the medium. So I've contacted a few art schools, and I've been able to donate books through the grant from MAC. So thank you very much to the Greenville Metropolitan Arts Council for helping both with the development of the book pre-publication and for distribution afterwards. They've been, it's a fantastic organization here in Greenville. We're lucky to have them.
It sounds like you've been doing a lot for the book yourself too. That's really fantastic when the authors go so far to get the book in people's hands. That's really big. Miss Burdette just had a comment. She says, I'm looking forward to seeing the book and all its images. Such a brave family, helping us to understand anew the importance of holding on to each other in spite of everything. Thanks for your inspiration.
Oh, thank you, Isla. My friends from Montreal, who I haven't seen in forever because the border's been closed for a year and a half now. I miss my family, my siblings, and my architecture school friends. So whoever is there joining us tonight from there, I'm giving you all big, big, big hugs. I miss you.
Oh, sweet. Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing your amazing book and story with us. And Mr. Rose, thank you for taking the time to join us, as well as Ryan's input. Thank you for your service and for sharing your story. Do you and Dwight, Danielle, have any closing comments or anything you'd like to close with?
Well,
no, but in closing, Danielle, how easy would it be for you to create some of the work for a show in Florida?
oh, wow. As long as you promise me that it won't be traveling under the hot Florida sun, because in Costa
I know,
a little
it
fragile
would
to
be an
that,
issue.
but I'm sure my expert mentor, Pat, would have good pointers on how we do that. I've never shipped encaustic work, but that's why I have such a great mentor in Pat and the encaustic community online too can help me. I'm sure we can make it happen. Maybe
good,
the winter would be easier than the summer, so we don't have to worry about
Right, right. All the leftover vaccine refrigeration we could probably commandeer to help.
Oh, yes. Good. Well, my final comments would be to say a very big thank you to Dwight for hosting this and for inviting me to that exhibit a couple of years ago. That was such a momentous occasion for me. And of course, Pat, always and forever, for being such a great and generous mentor. And my kids for supporting me in all these endeavors. I know that Ryan and Marie and Renee are here. I don't see everybody else who's online, so there might be a few more of my family. Big hugs to everybody and thanks.
All right, I think that we will close it for the night then. Thank you. And Ms. Burdette just had a question. We did record, and I will share you can find it on our YouTube channel probably next week. So anyone who didn't get to see it, you'll be able to tune in and watch them talk about this wonderful book.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
All right.
Sounds great.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Bye,
time.
everyone. Big hugs.
Thanks, Ryan, for your comments. It was very insightful.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank
good
you.
night.